This video will show all the steps required to terminate an M12 connector to a sensor cable. Refer to the Ai1 manual for illustrated instructions on the wiring colour for each sensor type and the port on the Ai1 that each sensor can connect to. For this video, we'll be using the standard M12 sensor connector wire colours, which are brown, white, blue, black and grey. There are two types of back shells, so make sure that you use the right style. The right angle back shell is ideal for connecting to the Ai1 as it keeps the cable neat and away from UV light under the solar panel. The straight back shell is ideal for inline connections such as extension cables. So we're going to start by sliding the back shell over the wires so that it is in position for when you need it. The connector on the Ai1 is female, so make sure that you have the male connector. There are instances when you may want to be terminating a female connector if you're building an extension cable. Next, strip back 32 millimeters from the outer installation. This is the ideal length to work with. Not too long so that the wires are exposed at the rear of the back shell, and not too short that they're too hard to work with. Cut the grey wire, or the wire that connects to pin 5, a further 7 millimeters shorter. This is approximate, so don't worry too much. This is because this wire connects to the longer terminal on the connector. Strip a few millimeters of insulation from each wire. It doesn't have to be very long. This is the wire, this is the exposed part that actually connects to the terminal. Okay. Bend the wire back so that it folds over the insulation, and repeat this for all of the wires. Now, looking at the inside of the connector, you can see that each wire, each terminal has been color-coded to help figure out which terminal it is. Now, if possible, you might also be able to make out the number printed on the side of the installation. So you can see here, where my finger's pointing, that's number 4, showing this is terminal 4. So red is terminal number 1. This is the terminal which is generally the power pin. White is terminal 2. This is generally a data pin, such as SDR12. Blue is pin 3, which is generally an analog pin. Black is pin 4, which is always the ground pin. The grey pin is not numbered or color-coded, but it is the 5th pin in the middle. Again, refer to the Ai1 manual for details on each pin function and the wire color used for different sensors. So to connect, first loosen off each terminal so that there's room inside to allow the wire to be installed. Just be careful that you don't go too far, or the screw may fall out, which is fine, just don't lose the screw, and it may be a bit fiddly to put back in. So it's easier if you don't go too far out. But in general, I'm looking for the screw almost clearing the hole so that the full hole is available for use. Okay? Start with the grey wire in the middle. Now I install it with the wires bent back so that the screw pushes the exposed wires onto the body of the terminal, the conductive body of the terminal. And then as you tighten, tighten quite strongly so that the screw bites into the insulation. And you can see that's a very strong bond afterwards. And then we repeat for the other 4 wires, or the wires that are used for your connector. So in the case of color coding here, the brown wire in the standard connector is used for power. So we connect that to pin 1, which is indicated by the red marking. Now I like to, as I said, do it up quite tightly and then test each one when you're finished. Now by biting on the insulation, it does mean that the wire's held very tightly in the terminal, so you're not worried about it pulling out. So I've done brown to red, white to white, blue to blue. Now, as I said, these colour codings are just because I'm using the standard wire that comes with an M12 connector, which is what you'd expect to see on an extension cable and things like that. Your colour coding for your sensor may be different. For instance, the EXO sensor is red and black for power and orange for SDI12. So the orange wire would connect to the white terminal, which is used for SDI12. Okay, but again, refer to the manual for your specific wire colours. Okay, so that's the wires in each hole. Now, when you fit the back shell, have a look at the packaging that came with the sensor and note the notch that is shown, which is your alignment notch. So what that refers to is in here in the connector, you can see a little notch in the body. Okay, so that notch is to be at the position 130 as indicated on this image. So we rotate that until it's pointing in the right direction, and then we slide the back shell onto the connector. So there's a few notches on the housing that the back shell slides into. So make sure you get that correct and just double check against the image and see that the notch is in the right orientation with the cable coming out the bottom here as shown. Okay, and then tighten this. So it's nice and tight onto the back shell. So the last step is that we're going to fill this hole with the epoxy resin that comes with the connector kit. Okay, so now that we've got the wires terminated in the back shell on, we're going to fill up the rear of the back shell with epoxy resin that comes with the kit that you get. And if you want help, there's instructions printed on the packaging next to the alignment drawing. So we're going to be following these instructions. Now, for my ease of use, I've made up a little jig that allows me to make up many of these at once. You might want to either connect the connector onto the Ai1 to hold it in position, or you might just do it over the edge of the bench to hold it in position. Okay, so we're going to prepare the back shell for filling. So what I've done is the bottles that come with the kit, I've actually chopped the top off so that we can pour from one bottle into the other. So we're going to be pouring the resin into the hardener. And so I just use a screwdriver to do this. And so you use a screwdriver to scrape all the resin out of the resin bottle and pour it into the hardener. Now, the amounts in each bottle have been measured out to allow for a little bit of loss when pouring out of the resin bottle. So that's why we do it this way around, where we pour from the resin into the hardener. Okay, but do try and get the majority of the resin out. So in general, a thicker screwdriver will work well in this situation. And so then, once it's in there, we use the same screwdriver to rapidly stir. Now, I like to do it until it goes a little bit cloudy, and that takes around 10, 15, 20 seconds. So once it's stirred, we pinch the bottle so it's easy to pour, and we can use the screwdriver to get us started. Essentially, we're just dribbling the resin into the back shell nice and slowly, and if we do it slowly enough, it has enough time to flow all the way around into the back shell. Okay, so we're filling slowly, and we can control the rate at which it fills by tilting and squeezing how we like, and we're kind of doing it up until not quite the top. So we want to stop a few millimeters short of the top, and we can pause to allow it to settle. You can even wiggle the wires around to help the epoxy settle inside, and then keep going up until we feel we're just a few millimeters away from the top. So a bit more yet. Okay, and that looks like about almost the right amount. I might go a little bit more just to be safe. Okay, so squeezing in there. Okay, and then we use the nut. We slide the nut over and into position, finding the right starting point. Yep, there we go. And tighten the nut into the back shell. So what this does is it does squeeze some epoxy up at the top, and it means that we know we've completely filled the back shell. Okay, so do your best not to get any epoxy on your finger. It doesn't matter if it does, just wipe it off. And then we're really just letting that set for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes is the amount of time that it takes to cure to a reasonable working strength. Now, this is what's called a exothermic process, so it will actually give out a lot of heat. So if you're touching the bottle, you'll feel it start to warm up to show that the hardener is working in the resin, and especially if you were to hold onto the outer part of the back shell, you feel a fair bit of heat being generated. Okay, so give it 5 minutes, and then once it's kind of cooled down, then it's a decent sign to show that the connection is completed. At which point you will connect the connector onto the side of the Ai1 or the extension cable or whatever it is that you're using the connector for. Okay. Now, if you make a mistake, it is possible to get a second field wireable connector and replace it. Just use a multimeter when you're completed to make sure that you've made the right connections, the right pins through. Okay, you're good to go.